Welcome to the Housing Affordability Strategies Report. This is Miriam Chion at the San Francisco Planning Department. Over the past 2 years, we have been working on this report to provide you with an analysis of potential paths to resolve our housing affordability challenges. The analysis includes alternative policies, engagement processes, and funding opportunities that can be considered over the next 30 years. Now we're releasing this report amid the coronavirus pandemic, which has exacerbated many of the pre-existing housing challenges in our communities. Thus, based on the analysis in this report, we're preparing a housing recovery framework to retain shelter for our most vulnerable population, continue housing production, and invest in emerging affordable buildings. Much is unknown for the rest of the year, but we know that housing stability is critical for our health and economic recovery. I'm very thankful to our community members and housing policy leaders that guided the analysis in this report. I'm also thankful to our research team for performing a very complex housing analysis. This report provides the analysis for our city's housing recovery efforts, as well as our long-term housing plan and strategies. Our communities and the city have demonstrated extraordinary leadership with an emergency response that is containing the impact of the virus. We trust we can rely on that capacity to build a solid recovery path that opens new opportunities for people of color and low-income communities. We offer this analysis to our communities and our decision makers for their deliberation on the choices we can make to become a healthier, stronger, and more equitable San Francisco.
Hello, this is James Pappas, Senior Planner with the San Francisco Planning Department. Thank you for joining us for this overview of the Housing Affordability Strategies Report. The purpose of the report is to analyze how San Francisco can do more to improve housing affordability, particularly for people with low and moderate incomes. We have tried to provide a comprehensive analysis of investments and policies related to meeting housing targets and improving affordability. The findings from this work will inform the upcoming housing element update for 2022, as well as citywide housing policy implementation and neighborhood housing planning efforts. To complete the Housing Affordability Strategies report, planning worked with a consultant team with expertise in affordable housing policy, real estate finance, and econometric policy analysis, as well as community outreach and engagement. We also worked with fellow city agencies, in particular the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, also known as MoCD. Community outreach for the Affordability Strategies project included 10 community workshops, along with discussion groups, that planning conducted with MoCD in neighborhoods around the city in winter of 2019. In winter of 2020, our outreach consultant, Interethnica, conducted 5 focus groups in English, Chinese, and Spanish to share results of the analysis. Feedback from the 2020 focus groups is included as an appendix to the Affordability Strategies report, while feedback from the 2019 workshops is presented in a standalone document available on the Affordability Strategies project webpage. Planning and consultants also interviewed and conducted focus groups with policy advocates and experts, including nonprofit and market-rate housing developers, community-based organizations, tenant service providers, construction contractors, and others. Planning also spoke with academics and researchers working on housing policy. Ultimately, the point of improving affordability is not only to lower housing costs, but also to support racial and social diversity and equity in San Francisco. The Affordability Strategies report highlights various indicators of racial and social progress that the city can look to over time, including increase the Black population after decades of decline, increase in families with children after long-term decline, reduction of inequities between racial groups in terms of wealth, education, and health outcomes, and reduce cost burdens for low and moderate income households. To ground the analysis in the Affordability Strategies report, we looked at what it will take to meet existing housing targets and sustain progress over the next 30 years. Specifically, we looked at the investments and policies needed to reach the mayoral goal of producing 5,000 new homes per year with at least one-third affordable at low and moderate incomes per Proposition K passed by voters in 2014. One-third of 5,000 units is 1,667 units per year. Planning worked with MoCD to identify affordable housing preservation needs of around 1,100 units per year. Planning also looked at investments and policies to stabilize vulnerable residents, including people experiencing homelessness. It should be noted that these production targets are 35% above the average housing production from 2014 to 2018 and nearly double the average affordable housing production over the same period. So they represent ambitious but potentially achievable targets. It should also be noted that the combination of new affordable housing and preservation of existing affordable housing and production of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, along with the overall production targets in the housing affordability strategies, would meet or exceed the current regional housing needs allocation targets for San Francisco, also known as RHNA. However, RHNA targets for all income levels are likely to more than double in the next round of allocations. As part of our analysis of how San Francisco will achieve its housing production and preservation targets, we estimated where investment will come from. Private investment is estimated to provide more than 3,300 market rate units per year on average, as well as over 600 affordable units through negotiated development agreements and the city's inclusionary housing policy. City investment needed to meet remaining affordable housing targets include producing more than 1,000 new affordable units per year. This is more than double recent city-funded affordable housing production. City investment is also needed for preservation acquisitions of approximately 400 existing rent-controlled units per year, an amount based on the average number of units lost to no-fault evictions such as Ellis Act and owner move-in. City investment will also be needed to maintain the quality and affordability of approximately 700 existing affordable units per year. Two key housing policy issues are where new housing will be produced and what that housing will look like. To address these issues, we developed three future land use concepts, each of which can meet the city's targets of producing 5,000 new homes per year with at least one-third affordable and sustaining that over 30 years to produce 150,000 total homes with one-third affordable, or 50,000 units, as well as preserving thousands of additional affordable homes. For each concept, we looked at what the future neighborhoods and buildings would be like, as well as how residents would access jobs and services. These concepts are meant as distinct examples of how the city can grow, not specific proposals. In reality, policies from each concept could be combined to create an approach that might be stronger than any of the three. This land use concept adds housing in areas where San Francisco has already been adding most of its new housing, in neighborhoods close to downtown and in light industrial areas on the east side of the city. More of the city's low-income areas and communities of color are in or adjacent to these parts of the city. The solid pink circles on the map show where housing has been added over the last 15 years, while hollow circles show the pipeline of future housing development already planned. In the orange color are areas where additional housing would be added in this concept. In neighborhoods closer to downtown, new housing would be in towers and mid-rise buildings, creating dense, walkable neighborhoods close to jobs. In neighborhoods farther from downtown, new housing would mostly be in mid-rise buildings of 5 to 8 stories. This concept would need new infrastructure to support more residents in these neighborhoods. Because new construction would mostly be in larger buildings in areas with stronger housing markets, this concept would produce significant inclusionary housing and funding for community benefits. However, it would continue to focus nearly all development in just a few neighborhoods in the city and limit housing opportunities in areas in the western two-thirds of the city, closer to the city's major parks, beaches, and many of its schools. In this second land use concept, more housing development would occur along major transit corridors that would receive significant transportation investments to improve and expand service. Most new housing in these transit corridors would be in mid-rise buildings of 5 to 8 stories with ground floor commercial spaces, creating more intense concentrations of residents and neighborhood services, businesses, jobs, and activity close to transit. This concept would also provide significant inclusionary housing and funding for community benefits, and expand housing opportunities in more areas of the city, creating greater access to city facilities such as parks, beaches, and schools. Infrastructure investment would be essential to the success of this concept. In the third land use concept, more housing would be added in San Francisco's residential neighborhoods. Currently, most of San Francisco's residential parcels allow just 1 or 2 housing units. Height limits would not be changed in this concept, keeping most allowable heights at 40 feet, or approximately 4 stories, or less. However, more homes would be allowed and more property owners might create new, small multifamily buildings. Because many single-family homes are owner-occupied and prices and construction costs are high, the number of buildings renovated or rebuilt to add units may be limited without new financing and construction approaches. However, property owners would be able to add more living space for family members or create new units to boost family income. Most development would be likely to concentrate in neighborhood commercial corridors because larger parcels in these areas are more attractive for development. Building would tend to be smaller than in the other concepts, reducing inclusionary housing and community benefits funding. Development would likely be more dispersed, providing more access to parks and public facilities in more residential neighborhoods. However, the need for infrastructure improvements would also be more widespread. San Francisco's success in meeting its housing targets will in part depend on lowering development costs, which are very high. Construction costs in particular are among the highest in the world. San Francisco can support lowered construction costs by facilitating use of new technology and materials such as modular construction and cross-laminated timber. It is also essential to grow the pool of skilled construction labor with expanded apprenticeship programs and retention efforts. The city can also look to streamline approvals and permitting processes for most code-complying projects and/or those that provide higher affordability. The city could also look at fees charged to new housing development and consider changes to encourage more housing. To reach the affordable housing production and preservation targets in the Housing Affordability Strategies Report, we have estimated the city will need $517 million annually in 2020 dollars. The good news is that in fiscal year 2019-2020, the city has nearly reached this level of investment. However, in past years, the city has struggled to come close. Through fiscal year 2023, committed funding for affordable housing looks robust, but will drop off in later years without further action. In the past, San Francisco relied heavily on the Redevelopment Agency to fund affordable housing. Since the end of redevelopment in 2012, San Francisco has had to create additional sources to fund affordable housing, including the Housing Trust Fund, which draws on the city's general fund. Voters have approved affordable housing bonds in 2015 and 2019, which will be paid for with property tax revenue. The city uses fees paid by commercial and residential projects to fund affordable housing. Also, recently, the Board of Supervisors and the mayor have designated ERAF dollars for housing and homeless services. ERAF funds are property tax revenue collected by the state for education spending and returned to the city when minimum funding levels are met. In addition to the long-term strategies of increased housing production and preservation to improve affordability, the city must also do more to protect and stabilize vulnerable residents with immediate needs. The Affordability Strategies Report builds on the Planning Department's community stabilization work and highlights protection and stabilization programs administered by MoCD and HSH, the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. Key strategies include expanding tenant services such as counseling, education, and legal services, expanding rental assistance, for example, emergency help for people experiencing a sudden loss of income or those who are extremely cost-burdened, expanding outreach and services to specific communities such as the Black community that has been dropping in number to ensure that people are connected to affordable housing opportunities and tailored services, focusing housing investment to support vulnerable communities in concert with cultural district strategies, and focusing on preservation of housing serving vulnerable populations, such as SROs, and continuing to expand funding for supportive housing and homeless services. In response to the current COVID-19 crisis, planning has prepared a recovery strategies document to address the housing challenges caused by the crisis. These recovery strategies build on the analysis in the Housing Affordability Strategies report and were identified in collaboration with fellow city agencies and consultants. The strategies fall into four main areas, including avoiding a longer-term eviction, debt, and foreclosure crisis. For example, by providing rental assistance to low-income renters who don't have other resources, and connecting low and moderate income homeowners to available relief and resources. Continuing to increase shelter space and prevent households entering homelessness, for example through rapid rehousing and shelter diversion programs. Ensuring the city continues to build new housing, for example by prioritizing completion of affordable housing projects and supporting other housing projects that are able to move forward, as well as supporting and retaining construction labor. Finally, the city can also increase public investment to lock in affordability in the future, for example through strategic acquisition of development sites or existing multifamily housing at lower costs. Thank you for joining us for this overview of the Affordability Strategies report. To review, key strategies highlighted in the report include increasing housing development capacity with a focus on equity and access, supporting lowered development costs through lowered construction costs and streamlined approvals and permitting and potentially changes to fees, sustaining and expanding affordable housing funding for production and preservation, doing more to protect and stabilize vulnerable residents, and continuing to invest in homeless services and supportive housing. The city can also support additional efforts at the regional, state, and federal levels for funding and policies to support these strategies. We encourage you to read the full report and executive summary, as well as accompanying policy white papers. Please contact us with any questions. Thank you.